Greetings to all my viewers and a very warm welcome. Today, we arrive at the last part of Chapter 13, Part 3, the closing chapter of our journey through the 1962 war. But before we begin, let's take a moment to look back. In Part 1, we saw how Ladakh's desolate mountains became the stage of rising tensions. From the fragile lifelines over Jojala to Chinese road building across Aksai Chin, to the bold yet risky forward policy, we traced how posts were raised, often thinly manned, and always against impossible odds. Then, in Part 2, we walked through fire and sacrifice. The siege of Galwan, the desperate stands at Hot Springs, the ferocious battles around Pangong and Spangur, and the airlifting of tanks into Chushul. We saw names etched forever into history: Subedar Hoshiar Sinha, Major Dhan Sinha Thapa, and countless unsung heroes who fought till their last breath. And now, in Part 3, we turn to the final, immortal chapter, the Battle of Rezang-La. So let's begin, the Battle of Rezang-La. Friends, by mid-November 1962, as icy winds howled across the high mountains of Ladakh, the war entered its decisive stage. The spotlight now shifted to the Chushul sector, a frozen desert of rock, snow, and silence. Here, at an altitude of nearly 18,000 feet, survival itself was a challenge. Yet, it was on these bleak ridges that the Indian Army prepared to script one of the fiercest and most unforgettable chapters of the Sino-Indian War. Rezang-La was not just a pass, it was a gateway. If it fell, the road to Chushul and beyond into the heart of Ladakh would lie wide open. But standing in its path were just 120 men of 13 Kumaon, waiting, watching, and ready to fight against impossible odds. By mid-November, Chinese patrols and convoys swelled across the heights, signs unmistakable. An assault was coming. The Indian defenses were stretched like a thin thread across the Rezang Range, Gurung Hill, Chushul airfield, and the lonely pass of Rezang-La. Each post was vital, but Rezang-La was different. Perched at nearly 16,000 feet, cut off from supporting fire, and battered by blizzards, it was both a shield and a trap. There, in the freezing emptiness, stood Charlie Company of the 13 Kumaon Regiment, led by a quiet but resolute officer, Major Shaitan Singh. His men, 120 Ahirs from Haryana, had little artillery, no overhead cover, and only rough stone sangars for defense. Yet they prepared with calm determination, knowing the weight of Ladakh now rested on their shoulders. The night of 17th November 1962 was unlike any other at Rezang-La. The icy wind howled across the pass, biting through the thin blankets of the Kumaonis. Silence ruled the ridgeline until shadows began to move in the distance. At 1 a.m., an Indian listening post reported faint sounds, boots crunching snow, muffled whispers, and the clatter of equipment. Moments later, a flare shot into the sky. For a heartbeat, the frozen valley lit up, revealing the truth. Hundreds of Chinese soldiers, moving in disciplined waves, crawling up the gullies, inching closer under the cover of night. The men of Charlie Company tightened their grips on rifles. Ammunition was counted, bayonets fixed. In the benumbing cold, hearts pounded, but not one soldier wavered. They knew the storm was about to break. As the first light crept over Rezang-La on 18th November 1962, silence shattered. From 3 platoon positions, the Kumaonis opened up, rifles cracking, light machine guns rattling, motors thumping. The Chinese were caught in the open, their first waves cut down mercilessly. The snowfields turned into a deadly trap, littered with bodies. For a moment, it seemed Charlie Company might just hold. But then, the mountains roared back. The PLA unleashed a storm, 132mm rockets, 120mm mortars, and 75mm recoilless rifles, joined by relentless machine gun bursts. The thin stone sangars shook, roofs of tin and rock splintered under the pounding. Each blast carved into the frozen ridge, hurling men and debris into the air. Yet, through the smoke and fire, the Kumaonis held firm, answering shell for shell, bullet for bullet. The Battle of Rezang-La had truly begun. By 7:30 a.m., 2 platoons at Rezang-La had been swallowed by the storm. The ridgeline was choked with smoke, snow, and the fallen. Amidst the chaos stood Major Shaitan Singh, already wounded by enemy machine gun fire. His men pleaded with him to fall back, but he refused. Carried from sangar to sangar, he urged his soldiers on, his voice rising above the thunder of shells. His final command was not retreat, but defiance. Hold your ground. Fight to the last man. One by one, the Kumaonis fell, but none abandoned their post. Surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned, Charlie Company chose honor over surrender. Every soldier of Rezang-La fought till his last breath, carving immortality into the frozen rocks of Ladakh. Amidst the silence of Rezang-La, when nearly every defender had fallen, one figure stirred. Havildar Ram Singh, gravely wounded, lay among his fallen brothers. The snow around him was crimson, the air still echoing with the last gunfire. Believed dead by the enemy, he summoned an iron will to live, not for himself, but to tell the world of what had happened here. Through blistering winds and enemy fire, he crawled, inch by inch, dragging his broken body across the frozen battlefield. Days later, he reached safety, barely alive, but carrying a story of unimaginable courage. It was through his testimony that India and the world came to know the scale of sacrifice at Rezang-La, how a handful of men defeat thousands, and fought to the very last breath. Even as Rezang-La turned into a saga of sacrifice, the battlefront thundered elsewhere. At Gurung Hill, the legendary Gorkhas of 1/8 Gorkha Rifles stood their ground. Wave after wave of Chinese infantry surged forward, shouting war cries, but each time they were met with the chilling steel and relentless firepower of the Gorkhas. The enemy paid for every yard in blood. Just across at Paw Hill, the Kumaonis faced their own storm. Mortars and artillery shells rained down, shaking the icy earth. Yet, through smoke and rubble, they held, firing back with calm precision. What turned the tide was Indian artillery. The 13th Field Regiment, manning their 25-pounder guns at freezing heights, unleashed a wall of fire. Each thunderous barrage shattered Chinese assaults, breaking their momentum and saving the heights from being overrun. Together, the grit of the infantry and the roar of the guns made Gurung Hill and Paw Hill unshakable fortresses of resistance. When the guns finally fell silent at Rezang-La, the snow was red with sacrifice. Out of 120 brave Kumaonis, 114 had given their lives, every man at his post, every bullet fired in defiance. For days, silence haunted the wind-swept pass, broken only by echoes of the last stand. When recovery teams finally reached, they found soldiers still clutching rifles, many frozen in firing position. It was not just a battlefield, it was a monument of unmatched valor. This was not a defeat. It was a testament, a message carved into the icy mountains, that courage can defy even impossible odds. For his extraordinary leadership and supreme sacrifice, Major Shaitan Singh was awarded the Param Veer Chakra, India's highest military honor, and the men of 13 Kumaon Charlie Company entered history as legends, their story echoing forever in the heart of the nation. The frozen heights of Rezang-La still whisper the courage of those who fought and fell. Their story is not just history. It is a reminder of duty, sacrifice, and the unyielding spirit of the Indian soldier. In the silence of those mountains, every gust of wind carries their memory. And as we remember the heroes of Rezang-La, we honor not only their sacrifice, but the timeless lesson they left for us to stand firm no matter the odds. And here we come, friends, the end of the 1962 war series for DSSC 2026. We've walked together through Ladakh, Galwan, Pangong, and Rezang-La, learning not just about battles, but about courage, sacrifice, and leadership in the harshest of conditions. Now, it's your turn to revise. If you've made notes, go back and strengthen them. And if you'd like the complete PDF notes, feel free to call on the number shown on your screen. We'll meet again in the next part of our journey as we continue exploring India's military history and lessons for the future. Till then, Jai Hind.